Hello! Story time with Nurse Kelli. Actually, what I really need to do is, true story. I have readers. So I think perhaps I should start. No, just kidding, I can't do it. You know what? Something I haven't shared. I'm a lot of things. I am a mom, a wife, a friend, a daughter, a sister, a cook, housekeeper, chauffeur, school nurse. I'm a lot of things, but the one thing first and foremost that I am is a Christian woman. And I've not shared that with you before, and I really think that it's important now with everything going on. We all need to take some time every day and pray that God will protect us, pray that God will watch over us and take care of those in the healthcare field, from your doctors to your nurses to your housekeepers to your ambulance drivers to your EMT to your paramedics. Think of all the people that still have to show up, okay, that we need, and we need to stay out of their way. So I want you to join me in praying for these people and praying that God will help everyone remain calm and trust in his perfect word and timing, and that people will stay home and stay out of the way. When you're out and about and doing unnecessary things, you're just adding to the chaos. You are risking everybody getting sick, okay? So say your prayers, all right? He is greater than any coronavirus, and he will protect us, and he will get us through this. So pray, pray, pray. The book that I got today, I thought was pretty funny because I imagine a lot of you are with babysitters. So it's called Don't Eat the Babysitter. Y'all need to be nice to your babysitters, okay? Oh my goodness. Don't Eat the Babysitter by Nick Ward. And again, there is no illustrator, so I kind of assume maybe he's illustrator. I don't know. All right. Sammy, I gotta get this so you can see it better. Sammy and Sophie Shark were very excited. Mom and Dad had gone out for the evening, and Anna, their favorite babysitter, had come over to look after them. But when Sammy became too excited, he had the unfortunate habit, as all young sharks do, of biting things. "Supper's ready," called Anna. "What is it?" asked Sammy, rushing into the room. "It's your favorite," said Sophie. "Kitty fingers." "Yummy," cheered Sammy. He opened his mouth and... crunch! "Oh, Sammy," cried Sophie, "don't eat the supper tray." Sorry, said Sammy. "Never mind," said Anna. "Let's play a game of cards." "Great," cried Sammy. What do we do?" "Well, we turn the cards over," explained Anna. "And if two cards match, the first one to shout snap wins." They started to turn over their cards. First Anna, then Sophie, then Sammy. His tail twitched with excitement. "Snap!" shouted Sophie when she saw two cards the same. "I won!" "That's not fair," said Sammy. "Never mind, Sammy," said Anna. "Let's play again." Anna turned over another card. Then Sammy went. Crunch! "Oh, Sammy," said Sophie. "It's snap, not crunch." "Sorry," said Sammy, blushing. "I didn't mean to." "Never mind," said Anna, checking her watch. "Your favorite TV show is about to start." Anna turned on the television. "Terrors of the Deep," said the announcer. "Yay!" shouted Sammy, and they settled down to watch. Sammy's tail twitched with excitement. "Deep in the inky black ocean," said the television, "lives awesome giant octopus. He's huge and he's fierce and yum, yum, yum. He eats little sharks for breakfast." "Oh no," shouted Sammy. He opened his mouth and... crunch! "Oh, Sammy," gasped Sophie. "Don't eat the television." Sorry, gulped Sammy. It was an accident. Never mind, smiled Anna. It's time for your bath now. Anna's pretty patient. What is this never mind malarkey? I'd be like, Sammy, get to your room. Sammy and Sophie loved bath time. Sophie spread some bubbles up on top of a big yellow sponge. Who wants a piece of my lovely sponge cake? She asked. Me, cried Sammy, all in a lather. He opened his mouth and... but we can all guess what he did. Crunch! Oh, Sammy, sighed Sophie. Don't eat the bath. Sorry, sputtered Sammy. Never mind, dear, said Anna. I think it's time for bed now. I bet Anna is ready for Sammy to go to bed. What do you think? But I'm not tired, yawned Sammy as Anna kissed him goodnight. I'm not tired, he mumbled as she turned off the light. Just think of nice things, said Anna. You'll soon drift off to sleep. I'm not. And then Sammy fell fast asleep. Sammy dreamt of his favorite things. He dreamt of a big squashy marshmallow. Crunch went his pillow. He dreamt of a big bar of chocolate. Crunch. And went his dresser. He dreamt of a big juicy burger. Crunch went his bed. Wake up, Sammy, called Sophie. You're eating the bedroom. What's all this noise? Asked Anna, the babysitter, diving into the room. Sammy was dreaming of a giant kitty finger. He opened his mouth and... Sammy! cried Sophie. Don't eat the... Just then, Mom and Dad arrived home and Sammy woke up. Hello, darlings, said Mom. Have you been good? Well, giggled Sophie. Sammy ate the TV and the supper tray and the cards and the bath and the bedroom. And, well, where's Anna? Asked Mom. Yes, where's Anna? Said Dad. Oh, Sammy, they cried. You didn't eat the... No, here I am, laughed Anna. And they've both been very good little sharks, haven't you, Sammy? But for once, Sammy kept his mouth firmly shut. The little guy says, don't eat the babysitter, okay? Be kind to your babysitters. Okay, so on to Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. This one, I don't think is quite as long, so. And my book is literally falling apart. Where's Mrs. Tyner when you need her? She needs to put my book back together. Okay. This one is called The Tattletale Cure. It has been my experience that I know a lot of boys and girls that like to tattle at Mediapolis Elementary School. It was a cold, snowy day. Mrs. Hamilton gave the hot cocoa a little stir and went to the kitchen window to see if the children were coming. It was 10 minutes past 3 and almost time for them. Mrs. Hamilton fixed a plate of sugar cookies and got out 2 big shiny red apples. Then, just as the children rounded the corner, she poured the hot, fragrant cocoa. Wendy and Timmy came stamping up the back porch, and Mrs. Hamilton helped them off their galoshes. For you young'uns, that's boots. Brushed off some of the snow and hurried them into a nice warm kitchen. And how was school? She asked Wendy as she helped her off with her coat and leggings. Well, I hate everybody at school, and everybody at school hates me. Mrs. Hamilton was shocked. Wendy was 9 years old. She had nice fat pigtails, shiny brown bangs, sparkling brown eyes, and pink cheeks. Mrs. Hamilton didn't see how anyone could hate her. She said, Why, Wendy, that's dreadful, dear. Why does everyone hate you? Wendy said, I don't know. They just do. And I don't care because I hate everybody. She sat down at the kitchen table and took a bite of the sugar cookie. Timmy, who was 7, was sitting on the floor taking off his snow pants. His mother said, Here, Timmy, let me help you. Timmy said, No, thanks. I can do it myself. You want to know why everybody hates Wendy? It's because she's such an old tattletale. She tells the teacher on everybody. I hate her too. Mrs. Hamilton said, Why, Wendy Hamilton, do you tell on people? Wendy, with evident pride, Uh-huh. I tell Mrs. Worthington every time anybody whispers or cheats or writes notes. I even told her when Jimmy Merton sucked his paintbrush today. We're not supposed to suck our paintbrushes. That is true. We're supposed to use our fingers to make points. She took a little sip of her cocoa and wiped her lips daintily. Wendy was very pleased with herself. Mrs. Hamilton was not pleased with her. She said, Wendy Hamilton, I think that's horrid. Telling the teacher about a little thing like sucking a paintbrush. Timmy said, Oh, she's always in there tattling. She's so busy spying and tattling, she doesn't even have time to play. Wendy said, "You better be careful, Mr. Timothy Hamilton, or I'll tell Mother that you haven't brushed your teeth for 5 nights and you gave your liver to Spot last Wednesday and you spent some of your Sunday school money on candy and last night you read in bed with a flashlight." And Timmy said, "Yeah, and this morning you put the rest of your toast in the silverware drawer. You spilled Spot's water and didn't wipe it up, and you ate half the candy I bought with my Sunday school money." Wendy, quite red in the face, said, "Oh, ba 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 to you, you old crumpet. Ba 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 ba, yourself, old dog eyes," Timmy said. Wendy said, "Mother, he called me dog eyes all the time. He says that only dogs have brown eyes." Mrs. Hamilton said, "Wendy, change your school clothes and then go in and start your practicing. Timmy, change your school clothes and then go down in the basement and put away all of Daddy's tools that you got out last night. I must say, you're both so disagreeable. I'm sorry you came home from school and spoiled my nice, peaceful afternoon." Mrs. Hamilton went up to her sewing room and closed the door. There was a nice little fire in the grate, and it was very cozy in there with the radio playing softly, big snowflakes drifting down past the window, and no sounds of quarreling from downstairs. Mrs. Hamilton was letting down the hem of Wendy's summer dresses, and as she sewed, she thought about the tattling and wondered why Wendy had turned into such a horrid little prig. Look that up, P-R-I-G. Find out what it means. Tattling was a loathsome disease, and she was afraid that Timmy was catching it too. While Mrs. Hamilton sewed and worried, the snow piled up in fluffy white heaps on the windowsills. The coals hummed and blazed in the grate, and from downstairs came da 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 as Wendy practiced the Happy Farmer. I have no clue if that hum was right, but we'll just go with it. Mrs. Hamilton had just reached the stage where she was thinking, "Oh well, it will straighten out. Wendy's just going through a phase," when the practicing suddenly stopped. The sewing room door was thrown dramatically open, and Wendy announced, "I think you should know that Timmy is just sitting on the basement stairs looking at a book, and when I told him to do his work, he said, 'Oh, go bang on the piano, dog eyes.'" Mrs. Hamilton said, "I didn't tell you to check up on Timmy. I told you to do your practicing." Wendy said, "If I don't see that Timmy does his work, who's going to? You just sit up here and sew with the door closed." Oh, pray for that child, because if that was my child, I would be beating her butt. Mrs. Hamilton said, "When I need your help, Wendy, I'll ask for it. Now go downstairs and finish your practicing." Wendy turned and flounced down the stairs. Mrs. Hamilton got up and closed the sewing room door. Again, everything was peaceful. The Happy Farmer was thumped out indignantly on the piano, and from the basement there was silence. This lasted exactly 10 minutes. Then the sewing room door again was thrown open to reveal both Wendy and Timmy, jostling for position and tattling at the top of their lungs. "She's just an old spy. He's not doing anything but reading. Nobody likes her, and that includes me. He's the one that ate all those ginger snaps last winter. If you want to know what happened to the old fountain pen that Miss Wentworth left here 3 years ago, Wendy took it to school, and Marty Phillips stepped on it, and Timmy owes 13 cents on his library books and can't find his card. He called me dog eggs right in front of everybody at recess. She broke my kaleidoscope. He spilled ink in my desk drawer. She hit me. He teases me." Mrs. Hamilton marched them to their rooms and closed the doors. "You are to be perfectly quiet and stay in your rooms until dinner time." With a sigh, she went downstairs to start dinner. She had just put the tea kettle on when the telephone rang. "Hello," said Mrs. Hamilton. "Hello," said Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. "I've just baked gingerbread, and I wonder if Timmy," she developed an accent, "I wonder if Timmy and Wendy wouldn't like some. Molly O'Toole is making some tea with Kitty Wheeling and setting the table." Mrs. Hamilton said, "Oh, that's very kind of you, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle, but Wendy and Timmy are being so naughty, I've sent them to their rooms to stay until dinner." Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What seems to be the trouble?" "Tattling," said Mrs. Hamilton. "Wendy came home this afternoon and told me that she tells the teacher on everyone in school. She also tattles on Timmy, and Timmy tattles on her. I'm really terribly distressed. I simply despise tattletales." "Oh, so do I," said Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. "But tattletaling is certainly a common ailment amongst children. Johnny said blah, blah, blah. I said boo, boo, boo. And Johnny said, you're an old and as, and then so are you, and two. And he said, ha, ha, ha." Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle laughed. She said, "I have listened to every kind of tattling that there is. I have heard the sneaks, the teacher's pets, the cry babies, the mama's boys, the bosses, the little prissies, the whiners, every variety of tattletale, and I know that tattletales are really unhappy children." Mrs. Hamilton said, "Wendy told me this afternoon that everybody at school hates her, but she doesn't care because she hates everybody at school." at present that this is only temporary, but I do think we should start the tattletale cure right away. I have some marvelous medicine which I'll send over with Molly O'Toole on her way home. The pills look and taste just like licorice drops, but the effect is quite remarkable. Let me see. Today is Thursday. Better not give the medicine to Wendy and Timmy until Friday night. Give them each a pill Friday night and another one on Saturday. Call me Sunday night and let me know how things are. Oh, and by the way, I wouldn't plan on having any company over the weekend. The tattletale-itis cure is rather startling. Goodbye. Give my love to Wendy and Timmy. There was a little click as Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle hung up the phone. Mrs. Hamilton sat and looked at the telephone for a few minutes. Little black pills, remarkable effect. I wonder what they are. I wonder what they do. About 5:30, Molly O'Toole, all frosted with snow and starry-eyed from eating hot gingerbread, rang the doorbell, and handed Mrs. Hamilton a small package. A present from Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle, Molly said. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle said to tell Wendy and Timmy that she's baking gingerbread next Thursday and for them to be sure to be there. Mrs. Hamilton asked her to come in, but she said no, she had to go home and set the table, and she turned and skipped off into the snowy winter evening. Mrs. Hamilton went into the kitchen and undid Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's package. There was a small black box marked Cure for Tattletale-itis. Inside the box was a small black bottle. Inside the bottle were 4 black pills. Mrs. Hamilton examined the pills very carefully. They looked and smelled just like licorice drops, but she was sure they weren't licorice drops because Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle had said they were magic, and they undoubtedly were. Disclaimer: do not take pills or any kind of medication that you don't know what it is. Children should not be in the medicine cupboard. Stay away. Parents, keep it up, keep it locked. This is a story. This is not real life. She put the pills back in the bottle, put the bottle back in the box, and put the box on the top shelf of the spice cupboard by the stove. Somehow or other, just seeing that box marked Cure for Tattletale-itis made her feel better. She hummed as she got dinner and set the table, and when Mr. Hamilton came home, he looked so tired that she didn't mention her trouble of the afternoon. Instead, she waited until dinner was on the table before calling the children, and then she pretended not to notice their tight little buttonhole mouths and flashing eyes. When Timmy put on almost a half-baked potato in his mouth, almost a half-baked potato in his mouth, Wendy started to tattle about it. Mrs. Hamilton quickly sent her to the kitchen for pepper grinder. When Wendy gulped her milk and Timmy opened his mouth to tattle, Mrs. Hamilton said, "Oh, look at poor Spotty. He's so hungry." That's Gizmo.
That's all.
When Timmy put almost, by constant maneuvering, dinner was kept tattle-free. Daddy's home? Maddie's home. But the next morning and afternoon were horrible. The children quarreled and tattled from the moment they got up until they went to bed. Mrs. Hamilton closed her ears and thought of little black pills. But Mr. Hamilton finally gave Wendy and Timmy each a spanking and told them that if they could tattle to each other about him, just before they went to sleep, and when they'd stopped crying sufficiently so that she was sure they wouldn't choke, Mrs. Hamilton gave them each one of the licorice drops. She could hardly wait until morning to see what the magic medicine would do. The next morning, it was still snowing, and the children slept late. Wendy was the first downstairs. She came shuffling into the kitchen, looking like a cross between a scarecrow and a windmill. She had put on an old, faded, very small pair of summer shorts, a thin, raggedy t-shirt, and some old white sandals of her mother's. She hadn't washed her face, and she had slept wrong on her braids, so that one pointed north and one pointed south. Her eyes were all squinty and sleepy. "There's Mr. Peterson. Say hello to the children, darling."
"Hello, children."
Mrs. Hamilton said, "Wendy Hamilton, there's a blizzard blizzing outside, and here you come downstairs in your old summer clothes. Go up and put your blue jeans and a sweater on, wash your face, brush your teeth, and bring me the hairbrush." Wendy gave her mother a baleful look and went shuffling back upstairs. Then when Timmy came down, he had on his jeans and a sweater, but his mother went to roll up his sleeves to see if he had washed. She found that he had had on his pajamas, and not only that, but under his pajamas, under his pajamas, he had on his underwear. And underwear, long johns. That's what they're referring to in this book. As Mrs. Hamilton sent him back upstairs to change, she wondered fearfully if the strange outfits her children had put on had anything to do with the magic pills. She certainly hoped not. It was bad enough to have 2 little tattletales, but to have tattletales who slept in their underwear and wore pajamas in the daytime and wore summer clothes in the middle of winter was unbearable. As Mrs. Hamilton took up the children's oatmeal and poured their milk, she glanced fearfully toward the back stairs. How would they look this time, and what had the magic pills done to them? In no time at all, she had her answer. First, she heard shrill, frightening voices, quick chasing footsteps, slaps and yelps, and then racing down the stairs came the tattlers, each red-faced and anxious. "Mother!" said Wendy as she slid through the door of the kitchen. "Mother! Timmy!" But instead of the long tattletale she intended, out of Wendy's mouth came a big puff of black smoke. The puff of black smoke was shaped like a little black cloud, except that hanging from the bottom of it were 4 little black tails. The little black tattletales. The little black cloud rose to the ceiling and stuck. The 4 little tails swayed gently back and forth. That is a tongue twister, sorry. Timmy said, "My gosh, did you see that? Smoke came out of Wendy's mouth. Say, Mother, I bet old Wendy's been..." But instead of saying smoking as he intended, a big puff of black smoke came out of his mouth. It was 2 little black Oh my gosh. It too was a little black cloud, but it had only 1 tail hanging from it because he had only intended to tattle about one thing. Timmy and Wendy stood with their mouths open, staring at the ceiling. Mrs. Hamilton said, "Well, I've always wondered what a tattletale looks like. Now I know." Ugh, what ugly things. Wendy and Timmy didn't say anything. They looked at the ceiling, then at each other and the back of the ceiling. Finally, sat down to breakfast. After breakfast, it was still snowing hard, but Wendy and Timmy said they were going to go out and shovel the walks. They put on their leggings, coats, caps, and mittens without a word, but they couldn't decide whose galoshes were whose, and as they began jerking them back and forth and pushing and shoving, and finally they were going to yell for Mrs. Hamilton to tattle, when out of their mouths came 2 huge rolls of black smoke each, with a long black tattletale suspended from it. I'm going to show you. There is a picture. Where am I at? The 2 new tattletales soared slowly upwards and stuck to the ceiling, not far from the first 2. Wendy said, "What if that happened in school?" Timmy said, "Boy, the kids would sure be surprised. I can just hear old Miss Harkness. She'd say, 'Timothy Hamilton, you have been smoking.'" Wendy said, "I don't think I'd like to have that happen in school. All the children would laugh at me. Hey, these are your galoshes. I can tell because they're a teensy bit little tighter than mine." They put on their galoshes and went quietly out to shovel the walks. Every once in a while, Mrs. Hamilton peered out at them. She wondered what would happen if the black tattletales outside. Would they float up clear to the sky, or would they just hang above the head of the tattler? About noon, Mrs. Hamilton found out the children had finished the walks and were building a snowman. Wendy, who was the tallest, was putting on the head when she slipped and fell against the snowman, knocking him over. Timmy was furious. He thought Wendy had deliberately knocked over the snowman, and he ran and pounded the front door and yelled for his mother to tattle. When Mrs. Hamilton opened the front door, Timmy opened his mouth, and out came a big black puff of smoke with a tattletale hanging from it. The smoke rose slowly until it was about 4 feet above Timmy's head. There it stayed. When he walked, it moved with him. Timmy took his shovel and tried to bat at the tattletale, but the shovel went right through it, and all it did was make the tail swing a little. Wendy thought it was very funny. She said, "I'm going to get Molly and Dick and Hubert and Patsy so they can all see what an old tattletale you are." Timmy said, "You do, and I'll wash your face with soap, old dog eyes." Wendy said, "You just try it. And Mother said you weren't to call me dog eyes. I'm going to tell Mother. She said she'd punish you if you called me dog eyes." "Mother!" Out of Wendy's mouth came a big puff of black smoke with a black tail hanging from it. It floated up until it was about 4 feet over Wendy's head, and there it stayed. Wendy said, "Come on, Timmy, let's go in the house. What if the postman should see this old black thing?" They put away their shovels and went in the house. The black tattletales followed them in and floated up to the kitchen ceiling to join the other tattletales. Once during the afternoon, a strange thing happened. Wendy and Timmy were coloring at the kitchen table, and Timmy joggled Wendy's elbow, and Wendy was just going to tattle on Timmy when suddenly, remembering the ugly black tattletales, she looked up the ceiling and swallowed her tattling. As the tattletale went back down her throat, Wendy noticed that one of the ugly black clouds shriveled up and disappeared. A few minutes later, Wendy broke Timmy's red crayon, and he started to get up to tattle, but when he happened to look up the ceiling, seeing all the ugly black tattletales made him decide that perhaps Wendy didn't mean to break the red crayon, so he swallowed his tattletale and sat down again. Immediately, another black cloud shriveled up and disappeared. By the time Mr. Hamilton came home, there were only 2 left, the one with 4 tails and the biggest one with 1 tail. Mr. Hamilton gave one look up to the ceiling and said, "Good heavens, did the oil burner blow up?" Mrs. Hamilton said, "Come in the living room a minute, Charles. I want to talk to you." Almost done. In a few minutes, Mr. Hamilton came out to the kitchen with the golf club, which he poked and poked at the tattletales. It didn't do any good. The golf club went right up through them, but they didn't move or change shape. During dinner, the children were surprisingly quiet and surprisingly pleasant. In fact, there wasn't a cross word spoken the entire evening. When they went to bed, Mrs. Hamilton gave them the last of the pills, but she didn't really feel it was necessary. After the children were in bed, Mr. Hamilton got up on the kitchen stool and tried to pull down the tattletales. It was like trying to pull down smoke. He finally gave up. He said, "That is the darndest thing I've ever seen." Mrs. Hamilton said, "I think they're beautiful." On Sunday, Wendy made one more tattletale, and Timmy shriveled his last old one. Sunday night, Mrs. Hamilton called Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. She told her everything that had happened and asked her if she thought the children were cured. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle said that she was sure they were cured, but the important thing was for Mrs. Hamilton never to tell the children about the magic medicine in case she ever had to use it again. Monday morning, all the tattletales were gone from the kitchen ceiling, and if Wendy and Timmy had known it, they could have tattled to their heart's content and no smoke would have come out of their mouths, but because they hadn't taken any medicine the night before. But they didn't know it, and every time they started to tattle, they would gulp and look guiltily at the ceiling. Monday afternoon, Wendy came home from school and said that everyone in school liked her and she liked everybody. Timmy didn't say anything. He had a black eye and a skinned nose, but he didn't say a word, and he and Wendy laughed and talked as they drank their hot cocoa, but they kept their eyes on the ceiling. Ooh, that was a good one. Okay, so tomorrow we will read The Bad Table Manners Cure. Everyone have a good night. It's Wacky Wednesday.